Thank you, Reverend. The House will come to order. Please join Representative Rich in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shevell, please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile. Aye. Bacon.
Here.
Baisley. Representative Baisley. Is excused. Benavidez.
Here.
Burnett.
Here.
Byrd. Bockenfeld. Basenecker. Bradfield. Caraveo.
Here.
Carver. Catlin. Cutter. Rep Cutter. Is excused. Doherty. Duran.
Here.
Esgar. Exum. Froelich. Froelich's excused. Geithner is excused. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. Hanks. Rep Hanks. Excused. Herod. Holtorf. Hooten.
Here.
Judah is excused, I think. No, she's up there. Yeah, she's excused. Kennedy. Kip. Larson. Lindsay.
Here.
Lontine. Luck. Lynch is excused. McCluskey. McCormick. McKean. 77. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae. Mullica. All right, Mullica is excused. Neville is excused. Ortiz. Pelton. Pico. Ransom. Rich. Ricks. Ricks is excused. Roberts. Roberts. He was. Okay, well excused. Sandridge.
Here.
Sirota. Snyder. Soper.
Here.
Sullivan. Tipper.
Here.
Titon. Valdez A. Is excused. Valdez D. Van Beber. Is excused. Van Winkle. Weissman. Will. Williams. Williams here? No. Excused. Woodrow. Woog. Young. Mr. Speaker.
With 53 present and 12 excused, we barely have a quorum. Representative Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Journal of Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Representative Rich. Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. That was a beautiful aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The beautiful aye has it. The motion is approved. Announcements and introductions. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, members. This is an announcement about the business of the Judiciary Committee today at 1:30 in the Old State Library, aka the big room across the way. We will meet and we will hear 4 bills: House Bill 1211, Senate Bill 24, Senate Bill 19, House Bill 1228, in that order. See you at 1:30. Thank you.
Representative Tatone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, tomorrow morning at 7:30, Joint Technology Committee will be meeting. We're going to have an overview of cybersecurity efforts in the state and some committee action on some delayed recommendations for CDPS and HICPUF. So if you're interested, join us at 7:30 at 352.
Representative McLaughlin.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Good morning.
Well, Education Committee, we have 1 bill on today, 1032. And then we will have 4 sunsets and only 1 bill on Thursday, and that will be 1203. We will not be listening to 1019 on Thursday. Thank you.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Business Affairs and Labor Committee, important announcement. We do not have committee today. The bill that we had scheduled for today has been postponed to a later date, so no Business Affairs and Labor Committee today. And then tomorrow we've pulled off House Bill 1152, so we will only hear Senate Bill 34 tomorrow afternoon. Thanks.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've received approval to be gone this afternoon, Thursday, and Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carver. So approved. Representative Exum.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Transportation Local Government Committee. Now is the day that you get to hear a motor vehicle digital license plate bill by myself, House Bill 1162, 1:30 this afternoon. And there may be amendments, so I'll let you know.
Thank you, Representative Exum. Representative Ransom and Representative D. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today is Aerospace and Defense Caucus lunch. Hopefully we'll see you at the SSB 6th floor from 11:31. And if you still haven't received or an RSVP, please reach out to Vicki Lee, and there's a memo on your desk, or reach out to us.
Great. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before you two leave too quickly, just real quick, is there going to be a giveaway of Estes rockets, which come from my district in Penrose? At your aerospace day today, will you guys be giving away Estes rockets? No? Okay. Just wondering.
Well, you can talk about them.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, members. I have 2 announcements, actually. First of all, the Greater Denver Metro chapter of the National Placement Referral Association has a lunch today at the 1st floor of the Capitol at noon, if you would like to join there. And then followed by the Financial Planning Association, which will be hosting a breakfast tomorrow at HCR 107 in the basement from 7:30 till 9 o'clock.
Representative Montine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. Health and Insurance Committee is meeting today. Aren't we all excited? We are meeting in room 12 at 1:30 today, and we will be hearing House Bill 1095, House Bill 1075, House Bill 1047, and House Bill 1079. We'll see y'all there at 1:30. Don't be late.
Representative Weissman.
Thank you. Different announcement. Members of Energy and Environment. Energy and Environment is not meeting today. The one bill that was on the calendar will be heard at a different date. So no Energy and Environment today.
Any other announcements or introductions? Seeing none. The next order of business is general order, second reading of bills. Representative Kipp. Members, you have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Kipp will take the chair.
There we go. The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee reports are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader, and the coat rule is definitely relaxed. Okay, Mr. Schiebel, would you like to read the title of Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1086 until Friday, February 25th.
Okay, seeing no objection, 1086 will be laid over until Friday. Madam Majority Leader. Oh, okay. Mr. Schiebel, will you please read the title of HB 22-1022?
House Bill 1022 by Representatives Roberts and Esgar, also Senator Woodward, concerning modifications to the administration of the Colorado State Fair and Industrial Exposition.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1022, and there are no committee reports.
Thank you. Please proceed.
So to the bill, before we speak about the bill, I'll say first, this is a bill coming out of the Legislative Audit Committee regarding the administration of the Colorado State Fair. They had an audit conducted on the State Fair, and there were several recommendations that came out of that audit, and this bill reflects the statutory changes that need to happen to help the State Fair become better in compliance with the audit recommendations. We will talk a little bit about the bill, but before we do that, I do have an amendment to add. So with that, I move L002 and ask that it be displayed.
Thank you. The amendment has been moved and is properly displayed. Representative Roberts, can you please tell us about your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is the result of further work with the Department of Agriculture and the State Fair Authority. This is going to give them just slightly more flexibility in one of the changes that the bill is making with regards to the displays they need to do at the State Fair. We worked with the Department of Agriculture on this amendment, and we also got approval from the Audit Committee yesterday for this amendment. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I just wanted to come down here and thank you for a little latitude here and extend a sincere thank you to Representative Roberts. We sit on the Legislative Audit Committee, and we don't really have a protocol for amending Audit Committee bills, but he insisted on bringing the amendment back to the Audit Committee to pay fidelity to the fact that we had voted that out as an Audit Committee bill. And I just want to say that I really appreciate him doing that. It really speaks well to his respect for the process, and to Majority Leader Esgar as well for allowing that. We did discuss this amendment. It got unanimous approval in the Audit Committee, and I appreciate that moving forward, and I would urge support for the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really am excited about anything we can do to help the Colorado State Fair. I think they need flexibility. I think they need to do more things that help with their profitability. I think this is a first step. I think we should do more, but we want to do everything we can. The State Fair is a Colorado tradition, and let's continue this type of good legislation to support them.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment L002? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of amendment L002, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, L002 is adopted. Are there any further amendments, or would you like to go on to the bill? Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, what this bill does is makes two changes to the administration of the State Fair. One, it makes clear that the State Fair needs to display certain displays regarding various industries in Colorado, and we gave them a little bit of flexibility with that amendment. But these are educational displays for the attendees of the State Fair that educate Coloradans about the various industries within agriculture and within other parts of our economy that happen in our state. And then it clarifies that the hiring authority of the manager of the Colorado State Fair is with the Commissioner of Agriculture, but in consultation with the State Fair Board.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to thank the members of the Audit Committee who took up this bill. I have probably sat in, I want to say, at least 4 years worth of audit reviews of the Colorado State Fair, sometimes just for fun because I care about what's happening in that area. So knowing just how far that the Audit Committee and the State Fair have come to a place now where we're actually running bills out of Audit Committee to help support the Colorado State Fair says a lot. And I think it says a lot of the work of the commissioners. It says a lot of the work of the current administration that's working with the State Fair. It says a lot of our new executive director. I keep saying he's new. I think he's been there about 3 years now, to really turn around the State Fair and make sure it is successful. And when I heard about this bill, I absolutely understood what was happening with it as I had sat through those audit committee meetings. Part of the issue that we are addressing in this bill is these displays. They were in statute for a long time, but there was never any way to make sure and assure that an industry would actually come to the Colorado State Fair, spend time for 11 days, set up shop at the State Fair to have these displays. And we actually kept getting dinged on this on the audits. So this is a way to really move forward and make sure that they have that flexibility to continue to have these displays, but to be sure that this doesn't hurt the institution of the State Fair as we're moving forward. The current folks that are running the State Fair and the commissioners absolutely understand why we need these displays as well and want to continue that effort. They're actually very grateful to be able to have direct ideas from the Audit Committee on how to improve things and have moved forward with a master plan that's really instituting a lot of the points the Audit Committee brought in. So I just, again, this is how it's supposed to work, right? Thank you to the Audit Committee for really taking a look and working with the State Fair, working with the Department of Ag to really figure out the best pathway forward. And again, congrats to the folks who are really making the State Fair shine again.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I come down here to the well in strong support of House Bill 1022, not only thanking our Commissioner of Ag, but also the Authority Board and all those who are involved in this audit, but also the display, and our State Fair manager who continue to bring agriculture and industry displays to the Colorado State Fair, not only for Southern Colorado, but the great state of Colorado. And as we move forward for our youth in educating our communities, but also the next generation in FFA and all that we do for ag and the Colorado State Fair. So with that, you have my strong support.
Excellent. Is there any further discussion on HB 22-1022? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of HB 1022 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. HB 22-1022 is adopted. Mr. Schiebel, could you please read the title of HB 22-1024?
House Bill 1024 by Representatives Burton Woog, also Senators Hansen and Kolker, concerning an expansion of the existing sales and use tax exemption for construction and building materials used for building of public works to require that home rule cities exempt such tax on sales of such materials when used for public school construction.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move the Appropriations Committee report.
So moved. Would you like to discuss the Appropriations Committee report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The committee report, we added an appropriations clause. I ask for your yes vote.
Oh, and you need to move the bill first, so sorry.
Yes, okay. I move House Bill 1024 and the Appropriations Committee report.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, all in favor of the Appropriations Committee report?
Whoops, wait. Oh, and oops, before we vote on that, I also want to move the Transportation and Local Government Committee report. We have two of them.
Okay, I think we need to address that one first then. Representative Byrd, would you like to?
Second.
So we're going to do the approach first, sorry, and then we'll have you discuss that. So if there's no further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? Okay, well, the ayes have it. Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the Transportation and Local Government report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the Transportation and Local Government Committee, we amended the definition of public school to make sure that it was clear that all public schools are included, district public schools and all charter schools, so long as they are funded with public dollars. I ask for your yes vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the Transportation and Local Government report? Seeing none, all in favor of the committee report, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? Okay, the Transportation and Local Government report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have an amendment, so before we get to the bill, I'd like to move the amendment.
Okay, their amendment L002, is that what you're proposing? Is a multi-page amendment, and it was put on your desk last night, so it should be on your desks. Representative Byrd, you'd like to tell us about your amendment?
Sure. So what I'll do is build in the amendment with the description of the bill. So this bill exempts from local sales and use taxation all materials that are used to build public schools. Right now, only 4 cities in the state assess a sales and use tax on construction materials for these purposes. It creates a patchwork system of taxation throughout our state, making it more expensive for the state to provide public education for its students across the state. The amendment that you see before you makes clear why we have a matter of statewide concern to be addressed in this bill. It's ensuring that the citizens of Colorado know we are passing this bill to equalize and further the state's objective of providing a free, thorough, and uniform system of public education throughout the state, as is our constitutional responsibility under Article 9, Section 2 of the Colorado Constitution.
Thank you, Representative Byrd. Representative Woog?
Sure, thank you very much. Yeah, just like Representative Byrd said, this is going to lower costs. I think that's the key here. And to understand that it is promoting a uniform and consistent treatment of the sale of the building and construction materials statewide. So this is also going to create a more consistent and uniform tax structure. So folks, we'd appreciate a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on L002 to HB 1024? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. That's a very muted no. Amendment L002 to 1024 is adopted. To the bill. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, members, this bill seeks to exempt building materials used to build and repair public schools from local use tax. The bill was recommended by the Legislative Oversight Committee concerning tax policy and has bipartisan sponsorship here in the House, as it does also in the Senate. We're trying to create a more fair playing field for taxpayers and for students, no matter what city they live in or which school district they are served by. We want to make sure that in Colorado, schools are built where students need the schools, not just where school districts can afford to build them. I ask for your yes vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 1024? Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in reluctant opposition to this bill, and it centers on the issue of home rule. Regardless of the merits of whatever the tax is or whatever the issue is, and I want to say up front that school finance is something that's pretty darn important. But we do have written in our Constitution the issue of home rule, and that is an issue of local control. Each municipality gets to make those decisions themselves upon what they will and will not tax. Colorado Springs doesn't. This doesn't apply, and this won't affect us one bit. But it does affect people across the state when we start walking in and saying, this particular measure of the state constitution, we're going to override. And home rule cities don't get to make those decisions about what they will and will not tax. Again, regardless of the merit of the particular issue, tax, this focuses on an issue which is, I think, crucial, and it's something we should take a real concern on. If you do believe in home rule, if you do believe in local control, I ask for an aye vote.
Representative
Correction,
Tatone.
a no vote.
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
Representative Tatone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I rise in the same opinion as my friend from El Paso County. I spoke to my people in Arvada. They are a home rule city. They are concerned about the home rule aspect of forcing home rules to do what they do. Even though Arvada doesn't have this tax, that's the position that they take. So I'm going to be a no vote on the bill.
Representative Larson? Oh, Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate comments made by my colleague from El Paso County and Jefferson County. And members, I do want to make clear, if you read Colorado's Supreme Court case law, the assertion that home rule authority is absolute and that it will always supersede conflicting state law is an overstatement, and that's factually incorrect. Courts have made clear multiple times that conflicts between state and local home rule ordinances are the subject of a factual analysis to determine whether the conflict is one of purely local or purely statewide, or of a mixed statewide and local concern. In every case, whenever there is a conflict, if there is a mixture of statewide and local concern, state statute preempts. In this case, we have a demonstrated clear case of mixed local and statewide concern. So while I appreciate the comments brought by my colleagues, it is an overstatement of home rule authority, and I ask for your yes vote.
Representative Pico.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I have to disagree very respectfully with my colleague. However, the case law is not entirely, and while I hesitate to try and quote legal issues, there are at least 3 cases that have emphasized the right and the preemption of home rule. It is not clear. There are 3 cases that clearly establish that the venue for this discussion is with the city councils and voters in the municipalities that vote to tax this or any other item that one may not like. It is of no relevance that public schools and public school funding matters may be of statewide concern based upon some of these court cases. And I hesitate to quote them because that's long and I'm not the lawyer, but there is at least 3 cases that say, that uphold that right of home rule cities to make these decisions themselves. And I ask for a no vote.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I respectfully disagree with my colleague from El Paso County. I know the court cases that he's citing. They were decided in 1965 and 1972, respectively. And since that time, courts have gone and ruled that there is still an analysis to be had of pure assertion that home rule authority will always govern, notwithstanding any conflict, is an overstatement of the law and is subject to a case-by-case factual analysis. Here, at the very least, we have a conflict between 2 constitutional provisions. The state's responsibility, again, under Article 9, Section 2 of the Colorado Constitution, to provide a free, thorough, and uniform system of public education throughout our state, and the home rule provision that is cited in Article 20 of the Constitution. They're in direct conflict with one another, and again, Supreme Court has said repeatedly that where there is a conflict, state law will supersede so long as we can demonstrate that there is a matter of mixed statewide and local concern. And at a very minimum, there is a mixture of statewide and local concern.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I did notice those two particular cases in 65, 72, but in 1998, Winslow Construction Company versus City and County of Denver did, in fact, rule that the imposition of local sales and use taxes is a matter of local concern. And the courts said we will not overrule them. This is not cut and dried or clear. This is a case of local concern. The case law is mixed on both sides of this issue. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Byrd.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. With all due respect to my colleague from El Paso County, in 2018, the Supreme Court held again, in matters of statewide or mixed concern, local ordinances may coexist with state statutes only so long as the local ordinance and the state statute do not conflict. In all other cases, state statute will supersede. I ask for your yes vote.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't realize we were in a Judiciary Committee meeting, which is my worst nightmare. No offense. But anyway, Madam Chair, back to the bill. So members, I rise in strong support of this bill, setting aside the constitutional discussion that is going on right now, which thankfully we have a judicial branch of our government that I think is more suited to determine whether this is constitutional or not. Going to the support of the bill, essentially what I view this as is this is an efficient use of tax dollars. What we're talking about here is local communities coming together, passing bonds in order to build school buildings, and unfortunately in certain jurisdictions they're tacking on, in many cases, millions of dollars in taxes, baking that into the cost of a bond. So if I go to my voters and say, hey, we need to build a school here in Jefferson County for a charter school, for a neighborhood school, and we need X number of dollars to do that, the last thing I want as a fiscal conservative is to go there and say, oh, but by the way, we need to bake in an extra 8% so that we can pay the city for the pleasure of hauling building materials and building the school in that city. So, members, this is really an efficiency bill. This is going to have a huge effect in the jurisdictions where it matters on cost efficiency. We're going to put more dollars in the classroom. We're going to be able to reduce the tax burden on those individuals because they're not going to have to pass as large of bonds because they're not going to have to pay off a city for a totally unrelated purpose. So, members, I think this is a great bill. It's got bipartisan support. I rise in strong support of it, and I encourage you all to do the same.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to thank the bill sponsors for bringing it because I agree that it is a very good bill. It doesn't make any sense. It's essentially a tax on top of a tax because the school district government in general doesn't have money of its own, and we in Colorado can't print our own money. So the only way we can get it is to take it from a taxpayer. So it's taken from the taxpayers, given to a school, and then another government entity comes in and takes a piece of it for themselves. That doesn't make sense to add a tax on top of a tax. We heard from one school district in the southern part of the Denver metro area that they passed a $99 million bond a few years ago, and of that $99 million, $4 million of it got taken away in taxes off the top. It just doesn't make sense. I thank the bill sponsors for bringing it, and I know we can get into Supreme Court documents and this and that and the legality. It's just, frankly, it's just a dumb tax. I'm glad we'll be getting rid of it. Thank you.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my normal fiscal nerdiness has been shortcut by Representative Byrd, who already did too good of a job of describing all the things that I was going to describe. But I will also say the only one thing I can add is that laws that we pass in this General Assembly do happen to have a presumption of constitutionality, and you all should remember that as you pass laws and have concerns about constitutionality. And there's plenty of case law on that also, but I won't read it for everybody right now.
Mr. Minority Leader McKean. Did you wish to speak on this bill? Oh, okay. Oh, no, he will, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. This does feel like a Judiciary Committee meeting. It really does. So is there another case that we could potentially discuss here? Okay, good.
Representative Woog.
Thank you, members. We're all well aware of what so many Coloradans have gone through with COVID. People hurting, people struggling to keep their jobs, many businesses closed, many employees were unable to have a good year these last 2 years. And this is really doing more with what we have. That's what our voters want. They want us to use the tax revenue we have and do more with it. And this will certainly do that. So please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 22-1024? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the adoption of 1024, please say aye. All opposed, no? Okay, thank you. 1024 is adopted. Mr. Shebo, could you please read the title of HB 22-10? Oh, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1049 until tomorrow, February 24th.
Thank you. Seeing no objection, 1049 will be laid over. Mr. Shebo, can you please read the title of HB 22-1110?
House Bill 1110 by Representatives Basenecker and Bradfield, also Senator Story, concerning the circumstances under which a Board of Education may meet in executive session when selecting a chief executive officer.
Now I'll take over.
Thank you. Representative Basenecker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
I'd like to move House Bill 1110.
The bill has been moved to the bill. Oh, Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 22-1110. The title is Concerning the Circumstances Under Which a Board of Education May Meet in Executive Session when Selecting a Chief Executive Officer. Long title for a very short bill that has a very simple message and policy. This bill applies to school districts and school boards that have multiple candidates in their final selection process. When districts are hiring new superintendent, they often have multiple rounds in the process. First, they solicit applications, they select semifinalists, then they interview the semifinalists and finally make their selection. If there are multiple finalists, then the process in this bill is useful to the Board of Education. Selecting a new superintendent may be the most important action a school board may have to do. This process must include difficult and sensitive questions, discussions about the merits and demerits of the candidate, and a decision of the order of the finalists to begin a contract negotiation. When the selection process is done completely in a public meeting, executive recruiters state that the candidates are reluctant to answer difficult and sensitive questions or even have their merits and demerits discussed in a highly, another personal matters in a highly public meeting. And most school boards are well aware that strong candidates are not plentiful, and losing one can make the next search more difficult. HB 22-1110 is designed to be a guidance for boards of education for their selection process to be thorough as possible and also as transparent as possible. She's not what?
Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to thank Representative Bradfield for joining me on this bill and working together to get this done. It really is important for school boards. And you might ask, what about school boards that wish to do things as they've always done, bringing forward only one finalist? This bill does not touch that process, and school boards are free to pursue only one finalist if that's their desire. This bill only applies to situations where a district chooses to name multiple finalists. In the instances where this occurs, the accompanying executive sessions can only happen if the board holds a public forum to solicit public input on all of the named finalists.
Again, nothing in this bill compels or obligates a district to engage in the process differently than they have in the past or in the future. It simply clarifies what is possible should it suit the needs of a district engaged in the search and hiring process. It's our goal that districts and other districts have the options of a more robust process should they so desire, and we'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 221110? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the adoption of HB 221110, please say aye. All opposed, say no. Okay, the ayes have it. HB 221110 is adopted. Okay, that brings us to HB 221104. Mr. Schiebel, can you please read the title of this bill?
House Bill 1104 by Representative Basenecker, also Senator Priola, concerning public recreational trails and electric transmission corridors of the state and in connection therewith, encouraging transmission providers to enter into a written agreement for the construction and maintenance of power line trails and requiring transmission providers to provide informational resources and notify local government regarding the potential for power line trails when planning for the expansion or construction of transmission corridors.
Very nice, Mr. Schiebel. Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move House Bill 221104 and the committee report.
Okay, to the committee report. Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move Amendment L005 and ask that it be properly displayed.
Okay, the bill has been moved and is properly displayed. Representative Basenecker, can you please tell us about your bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment that's being displayed right now is simply a technical fix to a mistake that was made in committee. We ran a number of amendments in committee to get stakeholders to a better place. I'm very proud of that process and the engagement from a lot of folks who at first glance saw the bill and decided it wasn't something they could support. We fixed and resolved those issues to get people to a better place, and this is simply a technical fix in relation to those amendments.
Thank you. Any further discussion on L005? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of L005, please say aye. All opposed, nay? Okay, seeing L005 is adopted. Representative Basenecker, to the bill. Sorry, to the committee report, apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In committee, we ran a few different amendments, in part to exempt municipal-owned utilities, to create some carve-outs for rural electrical associations, to clarify some of the statutory requirements that would be necessary for transmission providers. Also, importantly, we added some amendments that establish some clear rights in terms of right-of-ways. If a private or public landowner did not want one of these paths next to their property, same thing for a transmission provider, and then just clarified some of the language, ensuring that our sensitive habitats and wildlife will also be protected as a result.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on, Representative Holtorf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question for the bill sponsor that has come up. So in rural Colorado, the proliferation of wind energy is very evident. The proliferation of transmission lines is now growing and evident. There's a lot of concern about the infringement on private property. There's a huge concern about eminent domain takings with regard to this. And more importantly now with this particular bill, how does the bill and any amendments protect and preserve private property? Because there's a real concern that if landowners say, hey, I don't want all the bicyclists, I don't want all the bird watchers, I don't want all these folks coming out here and bothering my livestock or coming onto our property, creating traffic and hazards and other things that come with that. How is that preserved and protected?
Can I just make sure that we're still speaking to the committee report, or are you speaking to the bill?
I believe it's to the committee report, but if I need correction, I would sure accept
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the committee report so that we speak to that when we're on that, and then we speak to the bill when we're on the bill. Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank Representative Holtor for an important question. In committee, we amended the bill to add the following language, and it's prefaced by a does not, and I think that's important when you look at the amendment because as it reads, it says requires, but the language before says does not require a transmission provider to allow a power line trail or any other facility on its transmission corridor. And it does not require a public or private landowner whose property is adjacent to or inclusive of a transmission corridor to allow public access to any portion of the landowner's property. So that addresses the private property rights piece where if you have a piece of land and that right-of-way goes through your land or adjacent to it, you can absolutely say no to that power line trail. I would also say that this bill is not permissive in nature. The ability to build these trails already lives in statute. That's something you can already do. What this does is it creates a process whereby a local government is notified of the possibility for these trails upon the siting or expansion of a transmission line. And there's a lot of good reasons to not build one of these trails, and those concerns I think would be among them.
Representative Will, were your comments to the committee report? The bill, okay. Thank you. So I think that brings us to the end of the discussion on the committee report. All in favor of the Transportation and Local Government Committee report for HB 22-1104, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? Okay, the ayes have it. The committee report to 1104 is adopted. Representative Basenecker, to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's no surprise, as I just mentioned, that transmission providers can already build these trails, and I'm grateful for the feedback and the continued engagement of our stakeholders to put this bill in a better place. This bill does address a critical gap in statute and process at present. Specifically, the potential for these trails to be considered or built often gets lost in the shuffle of elected official turnover or staff turnover at the local government level. At the very least, I believe this bill will elevate the possibility for additional trails throughout our state with a very minimal lift on the part of transmission providers to do so. But again, nothing in this bill mandates that you have to build a trail, and we've created some specific protections for private property owners to be able to say this trail does not make sense in our jurisdiction. I hope to earn your support for 1104. It's important to note, I think, as equally as what this bill does allow to have happen, what it doesn't do, and that's mandating trails. We do think this is a value add for rural Colorado in terms of recreation tourism. If you've seen the Katy Trail in Missouri, that stands as a great example of what can happen if it makes sense for a jurisdiction or a transmission provider to go down that road. Again, this bill facilitates a conversation. It does not mandate a trail, and I'd ask state for your support.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Oh, Matt, an honor to serve with you, Representative Will.
Well, that took a while.
Sorry, trying to line up the next person who wants to talk about this bill. My apologies.
No worries. So I stand in opposition to this bill. I think there's too many things and too many problems that come along with it. Number one, we haven't addressed any kind of commercial use. We haven't addressed any motorized use. The trespass issues, I think, will be a really big problem. The private property, whether a landowner grants that easement or not, my experience, I've dealt with these power line trails. I've dealt with old stagecoach routes up on the frying pan. We had a state wildlife area that we just couldn't keep people off of. So if the trail goes to and then it hits private, there's livestock concerns, especially on allotments on public lands where gates will be left open. There's just a multitude of problems with this. And the wildlife concerns alone, a lot of these trails are going through winter range. There's going to be harassment issues, disturbance. I understand that the local, in concert with CPW and stuff, can talk about seasonal closures. But again, no mention of any enforcement. I can tell you on any trails in Colorado, especially on like these new power line trails or those as such, whether it's on BLM, Forest Service, state land, whatever, there's a total lack of enforcement on trail rules. We have a total lack of enforcement typically on seasonal closures as well. So it's just a free-for-all out there once there's an established trail. And the private property will not be respected on these trails, especially across these right-of-ways. So I stand in strong opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Representative Basin, I think Representative Catlin was first. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you, Representative Catlin.
Thank you. Members, this is a bill that looks like it would solve a lot of problems, particularly in recreational needs. The community is growing. More and more people have time to recreate, and more demand for recreation. If you look in the mountains of Colorado, you can see recreation rules. There are communities in my district that recreation is the #1 industry in that community. But underlying those communities is an agricultural industry that is struggling to hang on. We really don't need to be inviting the public onto properties that have been considered sacrosanct. You couldn't go on that piece of ground. We're now getting to the point where we have people that want to come on to these pieces of property and talk about, well, we'll just stay inside the power line easement. Well, I can tell you that people are not like that. People get on an easement, and they don't know the boundaries of the easement. They don't understand. So the property that's outside of the easement is so attractive, is so pretty, is so great. All of a sudden, they're now moving off the easement and onto this piece of ground. Regardless if there's a crop growing, regardless if there are cattle in there, these are the kind of things that we don't contemplate when we talk about putting an easement under the power line. I used to run an irrigation company, and we had 575 miles of canals and laterals crossing private land. And they are very tempting, these canal bank roads. A lot of them lead to public land. It's a continuous struggle to get the public to understand that that was a single-use easement for that canal and/or for its maintenance and operation. It's getting to the point where people ignore signs. Signage means nothing. I told all of my landowners, put up a no trespassing sign, and then you can call the sheriff. Well, wouldn't you know, most people arrive when there's nobody there, so we don't know if they're there. So it's caused a lot of problems in my home community. But a lot of these power lines cross those canal banks, they cross back up into private land and into public land. And the public simply doesn't understand that the underlying fee owner, the guy that owns the ground underneath that easement, has the rights to the land. It has to be, the use of that land has to be granted specifically for the use of this recreational easement. Because the power line company has an easement to cross the property, but only for operation and maintenance of that power line. In fact, there are easements that are negotiated for operations and power and operations and maintenance that have to pay the underlying fee owner damages for crops that are damaged while they're doing operation and maintenance. When we start bringing the public onto these lands, there's going to be no one to pay for damages because it's going to be held as a recreational easement or a trail, so to speak. Now, I understand the need for trails, particularly in urban Colorado. I'd much rather ride on a trail. I'm not a bike rider for you all to figure out first. I'd much rather be on a trail than I would on some of the streets that I drive up and down here in Denver. Believe me, I would not ride a bicycle on some of them. So I understand the need for recreational trails. The conversation can start. I think we're at a point where we can have the conversations, but I don't think we're at the point where we're just going to start really negotiating for some of these easements under power lines. I know this probably doesn't impact many of you, but I want you to understand this is a serious issue in rural Colorado. In testimony, we were told that we need more flat land trails. And they happen to be under these power lines out on the eastern plains. Straight testimony. It was a good piece of testimony. But the demand for flat ground to ride bikes on is growing because there's more and more people my age evidently riding bicycles. So they want a little less adventurous. So that speaks to the demand that's going to be put on people that own the land. For example, if my neighbor grants an easement for recreation on his property under that power line, and I've decided, no, I don't want them here. I can't afford that kind of traffic because of the cattle, the crop, those kind of things. There's no place to exit that easement. And I don't think most people that ride a bicycle get on a trail to ride up to a spot and say, oh, I need to turn around and ride back. There's going to be pressure put on the individual that does not want to grant that easement because they don't want a deadhead trail out there somewhere. Those kind of pressures won't just be written or verbal, because the bike rider does not realize there's not an easement from this point on across. It still looks like a trail, but it's not really a good looking trail, but I know I can get across it. We are inviting trespass onto properties that have decided they don't want an easement. Saying that municipalities should be informed simply says municipalities and counties will be contacting underlying fee owners and say, we want to see a recreational trail across your property. We're going to put a power line across you, which is already damaged. Power lines have the ability to condemn a piece of property. Is that condemnation process going to impact recreational trails too? I don't think we've answered that question yet. This is, on the surface, looks like this would answer a lot of questions. That we could start to expand the state of Colorado to be more attractive and more willing to have visitors to our agricultural communities. I understand that. But some of the underlying problems are not addressed in this bill particularly. The bill was brought forward with the best intentions, and I know how that works. I've got one that I brought with best intentions that's probably got as many problems as anything I've done. So what I'm saying is that we need to take a good hard look at how are we going to treat and how are we going to address the issues that are brought up by agriculture. Agriculture today is suffering from people that come to the fence line to take a picture of how my cattle are being handled and turned into somebody saying that's abuse. That's from the boundary line, folks. That's not inviting them into the middle of the place. And I understand the demand that we need to take better care of animals. Agriculture is for that. But when we start bringing people onto these properties that are not aware of what standard practices are, we get confusion. And confusion gets in the newspaper. There are going to be people in agriculture that are very concerned about this piece of legislation. They feel like they're being forced to allow recreation on a piece of property that was not ever considered recreation. Once the public gets there, they bring everything with them that you can imagine. Everything from the trash, to the disruptions, to the concerns, to the camping, to the idea that this land now belongs to the public. And I can tell you that for a fact, because on those canal banks that I used to manage, my men were out there picking up trash nearly continuously. And finally, one day, a guy left some prescription bottles in the trash. They brought those to me. I went to the sheriff. We filed charges against him because I had his name, address, and everything we needed. But that was one incident. So I'm telling you that the idea of recreation, I understand. I understand how valuable it is. I understand what it can generate. But I also want you to understand what some of that does on properties that never considered themselves as a recreational venue. You know, my place, I don't look at it as much recreation unless you want to borrow a shovel and help me shovel ditch. And I don't think the people that ride by are wanting to shovel ditch with me. I do understand wanting to get out in the state of Colorado, but I would like to ask you to let's take a better look at this as to what we can do to safeguard some of the property rights on the underlying fee owner on these easements. On the surface, this looks like an innocuous piece of legislation that will help people all over the state, and it might. But there may be people, and I will not say may, there are people that will be adversely affected by this to the point that it's going to cost them money out of their own property, out of their own pocket, out of their own operation that we have not considered in this piece of legislation. For that reason, I would ask you to vote no. Vote no today. And I would imagine I'll be down to ask for a no on thirds. But I do want you to know that I know this bill was brought with best intentions. With that, I'd like you to consider some of the arguments that I've made. Thank you.
Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank Representative Catlin for the thoughtful commentary and the concerns that were raised. I have a list of things just to go through, but I wanted to just mention first and foremost, what this bill does is it mandates that the transmission providers update their 10-year plans, which are submitted every 2 years with the possibility of power line trails inside of their areas. Nothing about this bill mandates that any of those trails ever be built. Nothing about this trail ever mandates that a private property owner or a public land be used for that purpose. Likewise, if a transmission provider is siting or expanding a transmission line, it creates a check-in with the local government to say, this is a possibility, should we talk about this? The local jurisdiction or municipality can say, no thanks, we're not interested. End of discussion. At the same time, I'd also like to mention that a lot of the problems that are happening around trails and trail usage, and not just in our state, but certainly the ones that Representative Catlin mentioned, are already a problem with how local jurisdictions and power line transmission providers engage in these conversations. I think to a certain extent this bill actually alleviates those tensions in as much as it creates a process for not just that conversation to happen, but also important public dialogue about why this might not be an appropriate use of the land in any different location. I would also remind the members of this body that nothing in this bill mandates that a trail be built, and that if you own the land where that right-of-way goes through or adjacent to that land, you can say no. So then we get to the issue of a turnaround. Typically what we see in these instances is that it'll be sort of a cul-de-sac with fencing and gating. Now, how does that happen? It happens downstream from this process. This bill is not prescriptive in terms of fencing or enforcement or any of those things for a very good reason, because those decisions are best left with the localities and jurisdictions who need to make unique adjustments and decisions based on how that would impact property owners inside of their jurisdiction. So I think that's important to mention as well, that a lot of the problems or I think concerns about this bill have to do with a process that plays out far downstream and already happens inside of state statute. You can already build these trails. And you can already have problems with fencing or gating or any number one of those things, or even enforcement. And that's an important conversation that needs to happen as part of the stakeholder process for that jurisdiction to get into and involved with the folks who own the land that would be impacted. I want to also mention around damages and liability. It's important to note that this bill does not touch existing statute regarding liability and damages, and those protections remain in place. So we did hear some concern in committee about liabilities from property owners. There are good protections in place now, and we do not aim to change those in the least. In regard to condemnation and eminent domain, there was an amendment proposed at one point by one of our stakeholders that would have allowed for a carve-out, basically saying that you couldn't use eminent domain for this purpose. The problem with that amendment is that it's unconstitutional, inasmuch as it would require a constitutional change for a home rule municipality to be able to be included inside of that. So there's constitutional challenges. Quite frankly, my gut says that transmission providers, municipalities, counties don't like using eminent domain for these purposes, and there's very few, if any, examples of this happening. The only examples I could find of eminent domain being used for the creation of these trails lives inside of a patchwork of trails out east. We did not find examples of or concern or even really a desire to enact eminent domain in regard to these trails here in Colorado. I think that's an important piece of consideration as well. Last but not least, the bill does not address some of these issues in part because the bill does not have to do with these issues. Statute already makes it clear that these trails can be built. If there are existing issues with enforcement or jurisdiction, those are things that absolutely can be sorted out in a contract between the transmission provider and the jurisdiction that would be interested in building the trail. That process already exists, and I think to a certain extent this bill actually helps because it makes sure that conversation happens. So again, I want to thank the representative for his thoughtful remarks.
Representative Pelton, I believe, was next, and then Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, I really can't add a whole lot to what has been said already. But, you know, I think we need to get an education piece in here. You have talks between the transmission providers and the local governments. There's already a major disrespect for private property from these people that go out and recreate out in rural Colorado. We see it all the time. This isn't talking about vehicles, but you take a vehicle out on a CRP during a hunt, deer hunt, antelope, whatever, and pretty soon it catches the whole country on fire. We've seen that. So I think there needs to be an education piece on the private property rights, how to respect, you know, if you go off of that, here's the consequences. And I just don't see that happening because, like I said already, there's a major disrespect for private property, and so I'd vote no on this bill.
Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you, Representative Bockenfeld.
I rise in opposition to the bill, and I'm rising to support some of the comments that were made by Representative Catlin and Representative Pelton. As a county commissioner for 12 years in Arapahoe County, which has an urban and a rural component, we ran by district, and I represented the predominantly rural portion of the county. We started an open space program. There was a great deal of concern with my ranchers and farmers in the rural part of the county with our open space that was being placed into the county, that the public would not stay on the property and that they didn't see the same boundaries that people in the eastern part of the counties observe. And it didn't take long. As soon as we opened up our first couple open space programs in the rural part of the county, I started getting calls. The general public was coming and enjoying the open space program or properties that they put their money into. However, they didn't see the boundaries. They were crossing over onto some of the farmers and ranchers' properties. We had to put in an effort to try to manage that. At the time, our farmers and ranchers pointed out that when you have property ownership, you have a responsibility to maintain that property and to maintain the people on the property. And so keep that in mind. Those are the reasons. These are real life examples of the general public when they're given access to private property, some of the challenges involved with it. So those are the basis why I'm in opposition to this bill, and I ask for a no vote.
Representative Basenecker.
Thank you, Representative Bockenfeld and Pelton, for the questions and the concerns. I did want to mention a few pieces that I didn't before, but I think it's important and could possibly speak to the concerns. The first is part of the bill does mandate that the transmission provider put out on a regular basis best practices for trail usage and trail design, and we feel like that could be helpful in both encouraging compliance with trail usage and also mitigating the potential for like wildfires, brush fires, or inappropriate materials to be planted around the trails, trail usage, how to close the trail, etc. So that is, I think, an important education component. The second piece I wanted to mention in regard to enforcement and compliance and folks going off trail is that it is not this bill. And that if those problems exist, I'm happy to work on them, but state statute already allows for the building of these power line trails, and if there's issues with that piece of statute, then I think that needs to be addressed separately from this bill. The other piece I would mention is that at inception, and even at introduction, the bill had a number of contractual pieces in there that we felt like weren't binding, but could be helpful to jurisdictions and also transmission providers in trying to figure out how to implement this if it made sense, including enforcement and compliance pieces. We struck gold in as much as those pieces were universally hated by everybody, and so we took them out. So as a result of that, you don't see those even suggested contractual obligations inside of the bill at present, but I do acknowledge it is an important conversation to have. One certainly we tipped our hat to, but ultimately our stakeholders, counties, municipalities, and others were not comfortable with that language being in there, and they felt it was best decided on a local and case-by-case basis. So I do appreciate the concern and just wanted to give that context.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I failed to thank my colleague with the bill sponsor here about the wildlife aspect of this, the consultation. That there's a consultation with CPW on any of these trails, and it's a requirement. They do talk to that, and that needs to be on the front end. I just want to say I've had a lot of experience with these power line trails and these type of things. Actually, on our state wildlife area, Garfield Creek State Wildlife Area that I managed for many years, we actually have a power line trail that we allow hunter access on. I can also tell you that on each side of that property, which borders the east and the west, are private landowners. We had to close that power line trail a half mile each side of our power line trail to avoid trespass. When we allowed it to the private property fence, we had all kinds of trespass. So we closed those portions of the road on the east side and the west side a half mile from the private boundaries to avoid that trespass. So, I appreciate the amendment on the wildlife side of that. I think this bill needs a much broader look. And like I say, I think the bill's with good intentions, but from my experience, this is going to be a problem, and these trails will become an attractive nuisance, especially to private landowners. We talked about the disturbance factor. We talked about I did mention the allotments on public lands. When there's gates, allotment fences, I'm just telling you from experience, those gates will be left open. So I'm in strong opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 22-1104? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of HB 22-1104, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. Madam Majority, I'm sorry, 1104 is adopted. And Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1038 until tomorrow, February 24th.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over till tomorrow. 1038. Oh, I'm sorry. 1038. My apologies. 1038 will be laid over until tomorrow. Sorry about that. Should listen better. Okay, HB 2217. Mr. Shebel, can you please read the title of it?
House Bill 1017 by Representatives Byrd and Woog, also Senators Colker and Liston, concerning an expansion of the excise tax exemption for alcohol beverages brought into the state.
That's right.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move House Bill 1017 and the Business and Labor Affairs Committee report.
Thank you, Representative Byrd. To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Committee on Business and Labor Affairs, we amended the bill to extend an exemption that previously applied only to alcohol coming into the state that arrived on airplanes and from out of the country. We wanted to standardize this to also be from airplanes or even cars just traveling domestically. We ask for your support for the committee report.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the Business and Affairs and Labor report? Seeing none, all in favor of the committee report, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. The Business Affairs and Labor report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Woog.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, members, currently there are quite a few people, believe it or not, that are transporting alcohol into the state, driving it across state lines, or possibly flying it in. And they are not even, many of them, aware that they may be breaking the law. So this bill simply increases the current exemption on the amount of alcohol they can bring into the state of Colorado.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on HB 22-1017? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of 1017, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. HB 22-1017 is adopted.
Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1039.
House Bill 1039 by Representatives Kipp and Van Winkle, also Senators Bridges and Woodward,
It's
concerning simplification of the means by which proof of eligibility for sales and use tax exemption is established.
Representative Kipp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move HB 22-1039.
To the bill. Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to my great co-sponsor, Representative Kipp, and the hard work that we've been doing in the Sales and Tax Simplification Task Force. This is a task force, if you don't know, that started in 2017, and what it tried to do is, for the first time in actually generations, is to simplify our very, very complex tax code. And out of that task force that has been meeting for 5 years now, we've had several big pieces of legislation come out, and several good pieces of legislation for the hardworking taxpayers of Colorado. And this is simply the latest of it. This is one place by simplifying the number of forms that need to be filled out to file taxes and to simplify the forms themselves, that we can help the hardworking taxpayers of Colorado by simplifying those forms and making the filing of their taxes just a little bit easier.
Representative Kipp.
Thank you. And that's really the essence of this bill. We heard when we were in the task force over the interim that there were some overly complex forms that people would have to, if one mistake was made, they had to file a whole series of forms in all jurisdictions again. So we're just trying to make this process simpler, and it will be up to the Department of Revenue to implement. I ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on House Bill 1039? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1039. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 1039 passes.
Thank you, Mr. Shebel. Can you please read the title of HB 22-1112?
House Bill 1112 by Representative Doherty, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning the notices required pertaining to on-the-job injuries covered by workers' compensation insurance.
Thank you. Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1112 and the Business Affairs and Labor Committee report.
To the committee report, Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had an amendment we ran in committee where we had various stakeholders who agreed to change the current 4-day notice to a 10-day requirement, made clear that there's no compensation reduction if the employer fails on their part to post the notice or has actual knowledge of the work injury. We also clarified the signage to state that to notify your employer as soon as you're able, because we always want to encourage reporting from injured workers. And we also clarified the division wanted to request that the notice poster be modified to be allowed for updated division contact information. And we also reinserted the 30-day notice requirement because we did not intend to take that out for occupational disease claims.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the committee report? Okay. Seeing no further discussion on the committee report, all in favor of the Business and Affairs Labor Report to HB 221112, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. Okay, well, the committee report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colorado employees are required to display a sign in the workplace informing workers of their rights and responsibilities if they're hurt on the job. We all want workers to seek medical care if they're injured on the job, and importantly, to notify their employer as soon as possible. This bill lets workers know what their rights are and how to file a workers' compensation claim. Currently, a worker has 4 days to report an injury in writing in order to receive their full benefit. This bill gives workers 10 days to provide notice of their injury to their employer. That way, workers have enough time to seek care if they need it without being penalized if they couldn't report within 4 days or didn't know they needed to. The bill also makes it easier to notify an employer by allowing actual notice in addition to written notice. And there is an option for a worker to not be penalized if they can show good cause for why they couldn't report within 10 days. Having workers know what to do when injured on the job is good for workers and good for businesses. I hope you will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, esteemed colleagues. So this bill is not good for small business at all. First of all, 4 days is plenty of time for a worker to know if they've been injured on the job and to seek medical care. In most cases, they seek medical care right away if they have an injury on the job, because they have an injury on the job. The notice is already posted. All the information is available. What this does is just put more businesses at risk. At risk of what, you ask? Well, now you're going to give them 10 days. 10 days to figure out, well, was I injured or was I not injured? Do I need to report or do I not need to report? Well, in most cases, that is self-evident, unless you want to game the system. This is a game the system bill. It opens the door for more gaming in the workman's compensation space, which is already a huge obligation to businesses. For those people that pay workman's compensation insurance, they know this is a huge liability to a business. Now it's even going to become a larger liability with this provision that, in my humble opinion, isn't even necessary. The law already accounts for this. Notices are already put in businesses. Employees already know their rights. But now we need more time to process the paperwork. So now, does that mean more lawyers get involved so they can have more legal action? More time to contemplate provisions for other type of action or civil liabilities now? What does this mean to small business? Well, I will tell you it's not going to help them, and it's not going to help the workman's compensation and the liabilities that businesses have to face. So some people say, well, this isn't really a big deal. Just a little more time. What's the problem, Representative Holtorf? Well, I'll tell you. For small business, it's going to be a problem. For workman's compensation liabilities, it's going to be a problem. They are going to grow because there's going to be more time to what I call develop the situation. If there's questionable employees that are trying to game the system. And ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest, it happens all the time. Now, for those citizens that have a claim and it's a legitimate claim, it's self-evident. They go seek the medical treatment. They make the claim to the workman's compensation insurance. All they have to do is give a notification, a phone call and a letter. And in most cases, any clinic or medical provider will be very quick to substantiate that in writing. So, bad for Colorado, bad for small business, bad for workman's compensation insurance payers, which is small business, and I will be a strong no on this type of legislation. I'm really curious why we think we have to do this. I'm curious as to the number of claims that didn't get processed in the 4-day period. Maybe our bill sponsor has some more information on that.
Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great bill that we did talk to small businesses, we talked to self-insured, we talked to Pinnacle. Absolutely no opposition in committee because of the amendment that we drafted. We were happy to come to the compromise of 10 days. What this does is it encourages employees who have been injured on the job to report an injury. And as you'll see in the amendment, we added notify your employer as soon as you are able. And we also think it's really important in the notice to have the current division information displayed so that injured workers know where they should report. Small business owners want to make sure that their employees who are injured on the job report their injuries because they're encouraging everyone to be a team player, and that's what this bill does, and that's how it was drafted and negotiated. This bill is good for Colorado, good for small businesses, and great for injured workers as well. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the bill sponsor, I've been informed that originally Pinnacle and other stakeholders were opposed to this legislation, and that brought the amendments on as a compromising tool. So, I still have very significant doubts. We have statute, it's suitable, it meets the requirements, and now we're extending those privileges. So, I have real serious reservations about the value and the validity of this type of legislation. And once again, Colorado continues to beat with a small hammer on small business. Small business needs to be left alone. Small business needs to operate in the small business space without more government regulations. They're not asking for more oversight. They're not asking for more rules, and they're not asking for more liability, particularly in the workman's compensation insurance. Now, Pinnacle Insurance has a monopoly on that in this state. I believe they're one of the only carriers for workman's compensation insurance, and that's a whole nother issue. When you carry the whole book, and I'm not an insurance man, but I know a few, good friends with some of them. When you carry the whole book on the book of insurance for Colorado, and it's a multi-million or billion-dollar book of insurance, boy, isn't that a nice book. But now, with this type of legislation, as you increase the liability, you're going to increase the size of the book. Now, my bill sponsor might not know anything about the insurance business, but the bigger the book, the bigger the premiums, the bigger the profit. Who carries the burden of that? Well, thank you, bill sponsor. It will be business, and worst of all, Colorado, it will be small business that doesn't have the economies of scale to handle the additional premiums that will result from this. Remember, Colorado, who brings you this type of legislation. Remember, Colorado, who puts the burden on small business year after year? I think previously we called it death by 1,000 cuts. Well, Colorado, here's another little cut for your small businesses as you have to figure out how to make payroll, as you have to figure out how to pay your rent, as you have to figure out how to pay your workman's compensation insurance premium, your unemployment insurance premium, your property and casualty insurance premium, and any other expense that this type of legislation brings you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's getting too expensive to live in Colorado. I think we've talked about that. So does this help? I would argue no, bill sponsor, it does not help. It hurts, it makes it more expensive to live and operate and prosper in Colorado, and small business, you need to be paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 221112? Well, seeing no further discussion, will all in favor please say aye? All opposed, no? No! Okay, the ayes have it. HB 221112 passes, is adopted. Moving on, Mr. Schiebel, can you please read the title of HB 221135?
House Bill 1135 by Representatives Snyder and Van Winkle concerning permitting the transfer of a marijuana transporter license with a change of ownership.
Yep.
Thank you. Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say what an extreme pleasure it is to serve with you.
And an extreme pleasure to serve with you too, Representative Snyder and Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that, I will move House Bill 221135.
Thank you. The bill has been moved and is before us. I don't think we have any committee reports, so who would like to speak to the bill? Or Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to understand this bill, need to first understand a bit about the transporter license. It was developed and it was something I was very involved in from a public safety perspective in 2016 by the legislature, because we were still figuring out all of the rules and regulations of what makes sense and what doesn't when it comes to regulating marijuana as instructed by the state constitution. And so the legislature passed and created this marijuana transporter license, and there are a couple of reasons for it. First, it is a vital step in the seed-to-sale tracking system. For those watching at home, any plant that is planted in Colorado legally, it needs to be in the seed-to-sale tracking. From the time the seed goes into the ground to the time it is sold at a store, that plant is tracked from manufacturing. And a key component of that is when it's transported. So if there's a grow operation in one part of Colorado, in the store in another, or a manufacturing place in between, it needs to be registered within that seed-to-sale tracking system when the plant goes from point A to B to C. So everybody knows what's happening. And secondly, we didn't want large trucks traveling on our interstates and roads and bridges that are filled with marijuana product or plants or something that aren't registered, that aren't licensed. So if they get pulled over, they can say, look, I've got marijuana back here, I work for this company, and here's my license to transport this amount of marijuana. To get a marijuana transporter license, a person has to be at least 21 years old. They may not have any controlled substance felony convictions or any other felony convictions for that matter, or anything drug-related for that matter. They may not have any delinquent government or child support debts, and they have to pay a fee, and there's a whole other slew of things they have to go through. So we want to make sure that when marijuana is being transferred across the state of Colorado, it's done in a safe manner. Now, what this bill does is it simply ties that transporter license to the business when the business is sold. And that just makes complete sense, because for a courier to even get in their vehicle and transfer that product or the plants, they have to have a manifest created by that business that they're transporting on behalf of. So this simply ties the transport license to the business in the event of a sale of that business.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as my colleague said, this is a bill that is really coming from the Marijuana Enforcement Division, and is kind of in spirit of a long line of bills over the last couple of years that is really looking to clean up this space and recognize that it is a legitimate business here in Colorado. They should have all the rights that other businesses have. So this removing this prohibition against the sale and transfer of a transporter license will actually reduce the regulatory burdens, increase the ease of doing business, has potentially really good aspects for the social equity movement. And what we heard in committee from one of the witnesses was that there's a real lack of access to capital because of this prohibition. This would make it easier for transporter companies to raise funds and get access to capital. So with that, we would ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 221135? Seeing no further discussion, will all in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Okay, HB 221135 is adopted. Mr. Shebel, could you please read the title of HB 221170? Oh, 1070. Sorry, man.
House Bill 1070 by Representative McCluskey, also Senator Rankin, concerning early childhood development service districts and in connection therewith, allowing a district to include in its service area less than all of the territory of an existing taxing district and to accept gifts, grants, and donations.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
I move House Bill 1070 on second reading.
The bill has been properly moved. Please proceed.
Thank you. Members, this bill comes before you today as a bit of a cleanup from a bill that Representative Rich and I ran in 2019. In that bill, we established early childhood special districts. We had failed to recognize a particular piece of language that is included for most special districts, and that is that any particular political jurisdiction, a county or a municipality, may be included in whole or in part when establishing a special district. This came to our attention because we have a wonderful collaboration of community nonprofits, government leaders, and citizens talking about establishing an early childhood special district in the Roaring Fork Valley, in my House district. And they want to be able to acknowledge that the Roaring Fork Valley is its own unique community of interest. It does not need to include neighboring Eagle County in its entirety, because that would mean including folks that are miles and miles and mountains away. So they just want to include the portions of Eagle County that are a part of the Roaring Fork Valley. In addition to this clarification and cleanup, this bill will also allow for gifts, grants, and donations to these early childhood special districts. I am excited to get this bill done, to see this work continue, because we all know in this particular moment how challenged our working families are to have that needed support around adequate, high-quality childcare, whether it's through tuition supports for that childcare or providing early learning opportunities for their little ones. Please vote yes on House Bill 1070. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 221070? Saying no further discussion, will all in favor of HB 221070 please say aye?
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Okay, well, the ayes have it. HB 221070 is adopted. And that brings us finally to HB 221101. Mr. Shebel, can you please read the title of that bill?
House Bill 1101 by Representatives McLaughlin and Catlin, also Senators Sonnenberg and Zenzinger, concerning the expansion of a program that allows a Public Employees Retirement Association service retiree to work full-time without any reduction in the service retiree's retirement benefits for a rural school district that has a critical shortage of qualified individuals with specific experience, skills, or qualifications that the service retiree has.
Thank you. Very nice, Mr. Shebel. Representative McLaughlin.
Good job reading. Yes, I would like to move House Bill 221110 on second reading and the Education Committee report, please.
Thank you. To the Education Committee report.
Okay. Yes, we had one amendment that was done, and it was to add BOCES and charter schools to the list of schools on this list.
Apparently you said 1110 and not 1101, so can we please have you remove the bill and the committee report?
Thank you. Yes, Representative Catlin corrected me on this. It is moving House Bill 221101, please.
Thank you.
And the Education Committee report.
Thank you. That's good, just to be safe. So go ahead, Representative McLaughlin. Sorry about that.
Okay. We only amended it once, but I'll repeat it again. We did amend this to include BOCES and charter schools.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the committee report? All in favor of the Education Committee report, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? Okay, well, the ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. To the bill. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an extension of a program that is working. We are asking to be able to hire retired teachers in the communities that they retired from, basically, to go back to the schools that are short of teachers. The program has been working. What we're trying to do is to extend that program. We'll also be bringing in people that, for example, a school nurse, para-teachers, those kind of people that help these school districts operate. In rural Colorado, we are short of teachers. In my district, we have people that come in, they get an offer on the job, they go back out and start to take a look at the houses and the housing costs and the expenses of living there, come back to the school district and say, I'm sorry, I cannot accept this job. We are short of teachers. We have areas that have had a shortage of certain numbers of certain types of teachers for more than 2 years. Rural Colorado is really in deep trouble in regards to teaching. We're trying our best to give these kids an education that will get them on the path to success. This piece of legislation will help with that. It helps to put teachers back in those slots, teachers that we know are qualified and we know care about the kids and the individuals in that community, and they care about their communities. This is an opportunity for Colorado to continue to succeed. This program is succeeding now. I'd like your consideration and a yes vote, and it is a good bill. Vote yes.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this bill was a sunset bill, and we are asking it to come off sunset and come back into the realm of a bill that really works for rural Colorado. This bill will only be for teachers and paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, bus drivers in rural Colorado. And because we don't have the opportunity to go to the district next door unless somebody wants to drive 3 or 4 hours every day to get to work, and that's really not very logical. So we like this bill a lot, but it really will help our schools, and it has been helping our rural schools, and we would like to continue with that.
Thank you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I was the only no vote on this bill, and I just want to come down here and explain my reasoning here. This is a difficult issue, and the challenges to rural Colorado and indeed all of our school districts are very real, so I don't want to in any way denigrate that. My concern with this bill is, frankly, that we are removing the sunset process, and we are now taking what was designed to be a temporary fix to a problem and now making it permanent policy. And the concern that I have here is that essentially what we are doing is we are allowing people who have done a lifetime of service in a school district or para, then they are retiring, starting to draw on those benefits to which they worked for and they were entitled to, and then going back and receiving a salary for functionally the same work. And again, not necessarily in all cases, but in many cases it will be for the same position that they were working in before. The reason that this is a concern to me, and should be for the rest of us, is because I think we all know that para benefits are fairly generous as compared to other retirement benefits. And when you have people that are in the system working, collecting retirement benefits that otherwise, by definition, in absence of this bill, they would not, because they would either be continuing in their position, not collecting benefits, or would be retired and not paying and not working. What we are setting up is an incentive system where many people, and people who will work their entire lives in this, under the current para rules, there are many people in their late 50s who are eligible for retirement as a para employee. And what we are setting up is a system where many people in their late 50s will make a very logical, individual economic choice to retire, start collecting benefits, and then return to work in the job that they're already doing. And this is going to further burden the para system. We heard testimony in committee that the impact of this bill alone could be in the $20 to $30 million range based on an actuarial analysis and a negative impact to para. If you go talk to any of our school districts, you will hear one of the major reasons why we are unable to afford to pay teachers more is because of the rising burden that para presents to their local budgets. In many of these districts, the para payment alone is 20 to 30% of the entire district budget. And this bill, again, this bill single-handedly is not going to break the bank. And if this were designed in a very narrow, specific way, I would be down here asking for your support of the bill, just as I did to a very similar bill literally a week ago, because it was designed to address an acute, specific need. But since there's no sunset on this bill, we have to look at this bill long-term. And long-term, doing things like this that are going to allow for para to pay out more than it's receiving in is going to further exacerbate our budget crisis for entities like school districts. It's going to further exacerbate our inability to pay teachers more, because we're going to have to continue to pay more into para to compensate for the benefits. So, members, I know this is a complicated issue, and again, I commend both the sponsors, because this is an issue that we're seeing in Jefferson County. I can only imagine how much worse it is in rural counties. So it's a very real problem. But again, my concern, if we were to throw a sunset on this bill right now, I would happily come down here and say, let's all vote yes. Because the immediate need is very acute. But this is a long-term bill, so we have to look at the long-term implications. That was my reason for a no vote. So I would urge you all to consider that when you're voting. Consider the long-term impacts to para. Consider what this is going to look like 20 years from now, when we are down here and we have school districts that are paying 40% of their overall budget into para benefits, and we are still asking why we can't afford to pay teachers more. It's stuff like this, and again, like I said, this is not going to be the thing that breaks para. But there's going to be more bills like this piling on, and we're going to get into a long-term situation that's going to be pretty untenable. So members, that's why I asked for a no vote on this bill.
Representative Valdez, or Gray? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to give the same talk I always give when we run these bills, which is we are addressing a very urgent need, and I was a yes vote on this bill in committee. I'm a yes vote on this bill now, but also every once in a while we should take a moment as a body and show accountability for what we're doing. And there's no fiscal note on this bill. This bill is designed to address the teacher shortage, which, as we discussed in an earlier bill, the state has an obligation to provide a thorough and uniform system of public education, but the state isn't paying for this. Para is paying for this. We talk about, in this body and in this building, we sort of talk out of both sides of our mouth on para sometimes. We criticize para for being underfunded. We criticize para for having unfunded liability and say, oh, we're doing too much with para. But we also fund programs like this on the back of para. There's no fiscal note to the state on this bill. There is a fiscal impact on para from this bill and from other bills that we've done that are like it, where we say we would like to address the problems of teacher shortages and other staff shortages in this state, but also we'd like somebody else to pay for it. And we put that on para, and then we criticize para for being underfunded. And that's okay. We'll do it. I voted for all the bills. I'm going to vote for this one also. But also, eventually, we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. The best way to address teacher shortages and other school staff shortages is actually funding education correctly. And so we're not doing that. We're underfunding education, and we're putting this Band-Aid on here. But the reason that this bill will pass and the reason that we'll move forward with it is we're finding a way to say we're addressing it and to actively address the problem by finding somebody else to pay for it. But then we also turn around on the back end and then blame them for not being fiscally responsible. So I think that as we do these things, this is not a sustainable solution for having educators in rural Colorado or having educators anywhere. This is something we can do, and there are children who need education and they deserve it and they should see it. But our job is to actually fund the system well enough that we don't have to go to Para and say, Para, you pay for it. We should pay for it. We should be the ones who are funding our schools adequately because it's in our job right there in the Constitution. So I thank the sponsors. Again, I'm a supporter of this bill because I care much more about the children who will benefit from having a good teacher than these points. But also, it's not sustainable to say the Para program is going to be what solves this problem for us. We need to solve this problem for us because it's our job. It's not Para's job to solve the teacher shortages that we have based on the fact that we can't pay them what they're worth. Thanks.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the bill sponsors for bringing House Bill 1101. And you heard the shortages we have in rural Colorado, from funding to nurses, to teachers, to bus drivers, to all the above in our school system, and how important it is now to continue to look at putting more funds into education in our communities throughout the state of Colorado, but also the importance in rural Colorado as we see the need now more than ever. And yes, you see in the fiscal note that there is not a fiscal note access for funding in this. Our teachers and nurses are in dire need in rural Colorado. I was speaking with individuals in Monte Vista just last week and we're looking at even shortage in administration, shortage across the board for vocational educators in our school system. And this is imperative that we continue to make sure that we're looking at addressing this throughout the state. So with that, you have my support, and this is a good bill. Vote yes on 1101.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I'll be brief. We have a problem in rural Colorado. We can't get enough teachers out there to teach these kids in many, many schools, in many school districts. Just look at my house district. Count the number of school districts I have and the number of teachers we need to teach those kids out there in rural Colorado. This bill helps solve that problem. And that's not a short-term problem, ladies and gentlemen. This is a long-term problem that's not going away for Colorado. In a year or two or three, we're still going to be addressing this problem. So this is a good bill. In the famous words of Representative Catlin, it's a good bill. Vote yes.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you, Representative Young.
As a longtime supporter of Para, I stand to urge an aye vote on this bill. As was heard, we've heard several bills around trying to find resources for communities who are short of substitutes, and today we're talking about continuing the program for rural areas, a program that has been very successful. There was a reference to the actuarial costs of $23 million. We've heard these costs several times from Para in testimony over the last several weeks. And really, we are looking for clarification from Para because this sum was used both for the substitute bill and also for this rural bill. And we're at this point, we're unclear whether these actuarial costs reflect all of the bills we're talking about, including 110 and 140 issues when people work after retirement in Para. So we're looking forward to that information. I also would say that it's very important to remember that as far as an incentive for retirement is concerned, this bill requires someone to wait 2 years before they can look at obtaining a position in this area. And though I don't have the specifics, usually in these instances, people do not return to their previous salary. That's what I've lived with as someone who's worked after retirement. So thank you for your consideration.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to come out and speak also in favor of this bill. As many of you know, I've spent the last at least 2 years really diving deep into para, working hard to find ways to make sure our state honors its responsibility to fund our unfunded liability on para. We have multiple challenges in our state. We must find ways to get teachers back into the classroom and at the same time honor our state's promise to people who depend upon our pension. I know that I'm personally committed to trying to find solutions to both. We need to commit to doing that, and we have to solve both problems. So I urge your support for this bill.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just one point that I do want to underscore with Representative Young, it is indeed true that it does have a 2-year timeout to return to the same district. However, there is no prohibition on going and getting employment in a different district, which again, in certain settings is going to be geographically impossible for this, but I would posit it would not be across the board. And again, I just want people to think about this, and people are doing what's naturally right for themselves. I mean, presented in this situation, if you've worked for 57 years, or not 57 years, if you've hit the rule of 90 and you're 57, and you're able to say, hey, you know, maybe I've been in the Akron school district, but, you know, I'm going to go be a teacher at Kit Carson. There are situations where this is going to arise. And again, these teachers are making perfectly logical decisions based on their own economic interests that I think any one of us would probably make. They're not doing anything wrong, but it's just setting up a system where they can do that. So yes, it is true that if I am the science teacher in Akron, Colorado, I can't quit my job and then come back and work as a science teacher in Akron, Colorado the next year. I'd have to wait for 2 years. But what I could do is quit my position in Akron, take a position in a neighboring district, as long as it wasn't within the Akron school district. So, you know, and again, it is a nuance and it is a safeguard that the bill sponsors, I'm sure, put in very intentionally to try to mitigate the impact, and I appreciate that. But it is not a perfect solution because it will allow for districts or for people to go into other jurisdictions and work, or indeed, perhaps someone from a suburban district to go and say, hey, you know what, I'll go work in a rural school district for a little while, which I think would be a wonderful thing, just in terms of addressing the shortage, but it does set up that incentive, and I just want people to be aware of that. So thank you.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify a few things, I would like you all to find a teacher who does that job for the money. There's not very many around who do it for the money. We do it because we love students and we love learning and we love education. It has nothing to do with making $1 million. And if we find a couple teachers who are getting their para benefits, they've retired for 2 years, they're coming back because they like the students and the other teachers and education, and they're making a little bit more money, hallelujah, they are finally making a livable wage. So I think we kind of need to look at that too. When these teachers go back to work, the schools pay into para and the teachers pay into para, and those years that they will be working in this new district, which is limited, will not be getting more years on their para, so they will not be making any more on that. So I think it's a good bill. Vote yes.
Representative Catlin.
You're taller than I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make mention, my co-prime mentioned this. But one of the things that will happen, and I don't think that was testified to in the hearing on the bill, is that when you go back to teach as a retired teacher, the money that you're paying into para stays in para. It doesn't come back to your retirement. It goes back to the fund for para. I don't think that was discussed enough at the time we had the hearing, but that's the way this is set up. And that tries to address some of the concerns that para will slip downhill quicker, because the people that are there teaching will pay into para and it will stay there. As was said earlier, this is a good bill. It's one that will address issues and needs in rural Colorado that we know about. I'm sure a lot of you here are aware of it, but it's very acute in some of the areas in my district. I'm not sure some of you know where Dove Creek is, or if you know where Yellow Jacket is, some of those kind of places, but they're very small. And there's not a lot of reason to go there unless you're a farmer or if you're involved in natural resources. I was suggested that maybe the answer to this was to buy those school districts a subscription to Data Farmer, and maybe they would marry and stay there. But I don't think we could find state money to be able to pay for that subscription. So in the meantime, this is a program, and it was mentioned earlier that this was a temporary fix. One of the things that government can do is to take an opportunity to put in a pilot program or to put in an opportunity to try and fix something and find out if it will work. And at the time we find out it works, that's when we turn around and make it a program that we're going to keep. For that reason, we're bringing this bill forward. It is a good bill. Vote yes.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on HB 22-1101? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of HB 22-1101, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, well, the ayes have it. HB 22-1101 is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move the committee rise and report.
Okay, seeing no objection, we will rise and report.
The House will come to order. Mr. Shebel, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole begs leave to report has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof and making the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1017 is amended, 1022 is amended, 1024 is amended, 1039, 1070, 1101 is amended, 1104 is amended, 1110, 1112 is amended, 1135 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading final passage. House Bills 1039 and 1038 and 1049 laid over until February 24th, 2022. House Bill 1086 laid over until February 25th, 2022.
Representative Kipp. Members, you have heard the motion. There are no amendments at the desk. The question before us is the adoption of the report of the committee of the whole. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. For those participating remotely, Representative Sandridge, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Sandridge votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem Benavides, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Hooten, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Hooten votes yes. Representative Burnett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Burnett votes yes. Representative Caraveo, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Caraveo votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Snyder. Please close the machine. With 39 aye votes, 22 no votes, and 4 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. That brings us to announcements and introductions. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make one introduction. I've got some teachers from my district in the gallery today, some public school teachers, one of whom happens to be my little sister. So welcome to the Capitol.
Welcome to the Capitol, and thanks for all you do. Representative Froelich.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not for nothing. No Energy and Environment Committee today.
Representative Titone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this evening, tonight from 6 to 8 at X Bar, One Colorado is going to have a reception. That's at 629 East Colfax. That's Colfax in Washington. So be there if you want to support the One Colorado group. Thanks.
See no further announcements and introductions, or Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee stand in recess until later today.
See no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.